Okay, the Lower Providence Zoning Board will now come to order, September 25th, 2014. Would you all please rise to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I can't keep everything up. Okay, we'll have the roll call, please.
Mrs. McFarland.
Here.
Mrs. Cluley.
Here.
Mrs. Esky.
Here.
Mr. Borai.
Here.
Mr. Hart.
Here.
And I don't have...
Gail Hager.
I don't have Gail, I don't have you on the list.
Gail.
Gail Hager.
Gail Hager is here. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm here too.
Oh, yeah.
And Mr. McLennan.
Thank you.
All right. Joyce, would you please read our statement?
Standard statement. The zoning hearing board will give all interested parties an opportunity to ask questions and testify in connection with the applications being heard tonight. After a witness for the applicant completes testimony, you will be given an opportunity to ask questions of that witness. In addition, after an applicant has completed its case, you will also be given an opportunity to testify, which will require you to be sworn in as a witness. If you wish to participate in the hearing on an application, you should complete the entry of appearance form, which will be provided to you by the zoning officer, who's sitting at the table next to our court reporter. Thank you, Mike. We ask your cooperation in maintaining silence during the hearing so that both the board and the court reporter can hear the testimony of the witnesses. We also ask that all cell phones be turned off. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay, next. We have quite a few items on tonight's agenda. It probably will be a long meeting, and we'll take a break halfway through it. So be prepared to make yourself comfortable. Okay, shall we go to the first item on the, everyone is all right with the
Yes.
agenda as it is?
Yes.
Okay. Item Z 1409. Bob, do you want to read it?
Sure. Z1409, Daniel and Patricia Tabor, 3987 Yerkes Road, Collegeville, PA 19426. This is a continued hearing. The applicant is proposing to construct a detached single-family dwelling on an unapproved land on 5th Street, Norristown. The applicant requests relief from section 143-37 R2 lot area requirements of 30,000 square feet down to 14,000 square feet. From section 143-37 R2 lot width requirement of 150 feet down to 140 feet. From section 143-37 R2 front setback requirement of 50 feet down to 30 feet. And from 143-37 R2 rear setback requirement of 60 feet down to 34 feet. The parcel ID number of subject property is 4300 04654 001, 4300 04648 007, 4300 04651 004, and 4300 04657 007. Subject property is located on 5th Street, Norristown, PA 19403, and is currently zoned R2 residential.
Thank you. Mr. McFarland?
Well, I think Mr. Hart ought to get combat pay for being able to read all those numbers accurately. Ms. Clements, you know how this works. You've been here before. You're no stranger to us, and we're no stranger to you. However, I would caution you that we really don't want to revisit what happened before.
And I don't intend to.
Obviously, because we have a full house, and we don't want to inconvenience these kind folks who are here waiting. So with that, you know how this drill is run, so go for it.
Okay. Well, just for the record, my name is Patricia Leisner Clements. I represent the applicants, Daniel and Patricia Tabor, on this matter. Do you meet with her? Okay. This matter was continued from June, I believe, and we had requested that continuance to allow us to provide you with some information about the surrounding neighborhood and the character of the neighborhood and other undersized lots and you know, how large the houses are that are built on those and so on. We have that. I have an exhibit that I have called the Survey of the Neighborhood that I would like to enter into the record and hand up to you as well. We also have a smaller exhibit, which is just a survey of recent, excuse me, recent variances that were granted also in that neighborhood on the same principle as what we're seeking. So that again gives you some information. It's from the public record, but it's digested or condensed and put into a more reviewable form. And I have one other exhibit that is a statement from Stanley Sarnasinski, one of the neighbors who had testified at the original meeting on June 26th. He couldn't be here tonight. He's on a fishing trip in New York, and it was just clarifying something that he had said as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to confirm that you had received into the record a letter from Francis Riccuti, attorney at law, dated July 23rd, 2014. It was addressed to Mr. McLennan, and it pertained to his clients, Mr. and Mrs. Miller and Mr. and Mrs. Tabor, who were property owners that had appeared at a prior hearing and had expressed a concern about the application, but that was, as stated by Mr. Riccuti, a result of a misunderstanding, and he was clarifying that neither Mr. and Mrs. Miller nor Mr. and Mrs. Tabor had any objection any longer and in fact supported the application. I have copies of that, but I thought you may already have that in your record, so.
We're certainly familiar with the letter, but I don't know that it's been introduced into this case. I think it was introduced into the Accolade Properties case.
Well, this was since July 23rd, so I thought it was introduced then, but I have copies of it.
I don't, yeah, you'll have to hand that up, because I don't remember that specifically.
Is that dated February 26th?
No, it's dated July 23rd. So why don't I have my exhibits handed up,
I have February 26th.
and then that really does conclude, you know, what we're doing tonight, because we had presented everything the last time.
And there was, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's all.
There was one issue that I had raised before, which was the res judicata issue, and we talked a little bit about that. And the question really is, from a legal argument perspective, is that applicable in this case? Because that is something that we've toyed with here, that we've discussed. So can you explain to me why it's not res judicata?
Yeah, two reasons. I think one is that it's a different.
Excuse me, can you explain what that means?
Oh, I'm
for
sorry.
the
Res
audience?
judicata means that
That's not fair.
if a case has come before that was similar in terms of what was sought, the identity of the parties, and the fact that the subject matter was the same, then it's in essence already been heard, and therefore it shouldn't now be brought up again. That's essentially the doctrine.
I have two responses to that. One is that the identity of parties is not the same. The application that was submitted previously was submitted and presented by potential buyers of the property as equitable owners and not by Daniel and Patricia Tabor. And secondly, then the evidence that has been submitted in the case is different. I think that particularly when you see that the Millers and taking away the objections that they had makes a substantial difference in that evidence. So the res judicata issue, I think, is not binding in this regard because of those two features.
So the fact that Accolade Properties, who was the previous applicant, is not the same as Mr. and Mrs. Tabor would defeat this concept of identity of the parties,
That's
is
what
what you're suggesting.
Yes, that is what I suggest.
Even though they derive their rights from the Tabors through that agreement of sale.
I do believe that's different.
Okay.
And again, because with the identity of parties, you know, you have a party can present a case in the way that they choose to present it, the evidence that they choose to present, whether they're represented by counsel or not. So what Accolade Properties did, being separate parties, didn't work for them, and they did not present their case in a certain manner or certain evidence. So the identity of parties allows us the issue would allow someone who is a different party to present what may look on the surface like a similar case, but the difference in the parties makes that difference. It's not res judicata.
Anybody have any questions about that concept on the board?
Well, then if I can come up with my tomes.
Please. Yeah, that'd be good.
All right, the first is that's the letter,
Is that on
and it's
Michael?
addressed to you, Keith.
Great, thanks.
Could you pass those down?
Sure.
I would have remembered this letter. Because he was involved in an accident, it says, and I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, we thought he was on the passing from his office, but that was part of the reason for our request for the continuance of the July hearing. The second document is a brief statement from Mr. Sarnasvitsky explaining he had talked about, in his testimony, he had talked about a problem with his well. He's clarifying that the problem with the well had nothing to do with somebody else drilling the well or anything else like that. It was a mechanical problem.
Same thing, yep. Thank you.
Thank you. One-page survey of recent variances granted. Again, the information is set up to identify the lot size, the building square footage of the house that was built on the property, the number of stories, the address, the owners, and the year in which the home was built. And then lastly, this is a survey of the neighborhood, which includes 4th, 5th, and 6th Street, as well as Hillside Avenue. And it is in ascending order of lot size. So it starts with the 4,000 square foot lots, going up to 38,000 square foot lots. Again, indicating what size building, what home was built on it, how many stories, the address, the owners, and the year in which it was built. So I have one for each of you. And attached to that is the information from the public record that indicates how we track that.
Yeah.
And Patricia, I don't want to make life more difficult for you, but we don't strenuously adhere to the rules of evidence per se, but can you tell me the preparation of these documents, who prepared them?
I prepared them.
Okay, and did you review them with your client?
I did.
And would you, Mrs. Tabor, testify that this is an accurate reflection of the record as you folks have, in essence, digested it for us?
Yes,
It's true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, reminding you, of course, that you're still under oath from the previous hearing.
yes. Well, and also we've attached all of the public records that we took all of the information from.
And I don't doubt that it's accurate, but of course, you have to remember that in this era of word processors and different things that can be done with software, you never can tell. I'm not suggesting that anybody monkeyed with this, but
Of course.
we have to make sure that it's accurate. I think all too often in proceedings, we accept things as being gospel when it may not, in fact, be accurate. So I'm just trying to get that foundation. So from your perspective, it's of record.
Thank you.
Questions?
I have one question. Did you transfer ownership of one lot?
No,
43000464800007?
I haven't transferred any ownership of any of it since we bought it in 2004. Two of them are owned by Daniel Tabor, general contractor, and two of them are owned by Daniel and myself, not in the business.
According to this, it's been transferred.
And when you say this, what are you referring to? I'm sorry.
It's a trend, sold properties.
Oh, you know what? It didn't, well, obviously that was from the sale that didn't happen because the variance was not granted to Accolade.
Well, it says it's sold 8/30/14.
Yeah, it didn't. I didn't withdraw it. My company didn't, they didn't take it out in time and it went settled, but then she withdrew the listing. It didn't transfer.
Okay.
I guess that's what you meant when you said computer justice.
Not exactly, but it certainly could fit within that category.
Right hand not knowing what the left hand's doing.
Any other questions?
Obvious.
I would just, I'm just looking at the list, and it's very comprehensive. It's an excellent job, obviously.
Thank you.
But a great many of these houses appear to have been built quite some number of years ago. Um, 1955, 1950, zoning wasn't even obviously in this township until 55, 56, I can't quite remember.
And it's speaking to the character of the neighborhood, which is an element of when you make a request for a variance, and that these are undersized lots. And I think there are only 2 on the list that are actually in compliance, the last 2, the 30
Yeah,
and 38,000.
you are correct. This whole neighborhood obviously is on very small lots. This appears to be one of the smaller lots than we've seen, and by we, I mean the board going back for, the last 20 years. I don't mean this particular board. In quite some number of years. And I think the smallest one that you can show that a variance was requested and approved was 15,400 square feet back in 2004.
Yes, but in the range of lot sizes within that neighborhood, it's not at the lowest. It's tending towards above middle, I would say. But yes, you're right, that the more recent ones were somewhat bigger, but they were all undersized and substantially undersized.
There aren't that many
I think a
out there.
lot of the people that are here tonight for other purposes have lots that are small and have to come in every time they want to put a shed up or expand a garage or, put a deck on. And I'm just wondering if, even though this lot is larger than some in the neighborhood, if after all these years, we should continue to approve houses on these small lots, which really inhibits the future owners to function, to live in the house in the way that I think nowadays people expect to live in one.
It's the nature, though, of the zoning variance process, that you're going to have lots that cannot conform to the existing zoning, or maybe even a revised zoning that has come along after the fact. And so it is what one has to do to make the best of the situation that is there, and that's what we're coming in to request that.
Right.
But
And I do think, you've done everything you can with this, I really do.
Thank you.
I think you've done a thorough job. That's all I have.
Okay.
Can I
Kathy?
just make a
Oh,
comment?
good.
First of all, thank you, because I believe I was the one that raised the point when you were here at the prior meeting, that what was tough to understand, even though, looking at the neighborhood and the size of the lots, the application that was presented at the prior hearing, and one of the paragraphs you had indicated to us, the zoning board members, that each of these small lots in this neighborhood, the quote is, each of these would have required the same 4 reliefs in order to be developed. It is our understanding that a few of these have been developed within the last 4 to 7 years. And I appreciate all of this. I haven't had time to absorb it all, but the 3 that you presented here, 405 Hillside, 2966, this is your survey of recent variances granted?
of variances that we had knowledge of, and there
Right.
is not a database of variances
So
available to us.
the year that they were built, if you look at that versus today's date in 2014, the first one was 10 years ago, the second one was 8 years ago, and the third one was 11 years ago. So that really, I appreciate that information because it's not the last 4 to 7 years.
Yeah,
And
this
certainly
clarifies.
going back to previous boards, again, it's hard for us to set a precedent and continue on, and it's a tough issue. What's hard for me is the size of the home on the small lot, where a well has to be dug, because there is no public water or public sewer. And that's a precedent in that neighborhood that could have a huge impact on any other of these small lots in the future. So that's a dilemma that I have as, trying to be fair and trying to totally understand the
Yes,
why.
it is a
So
balance.
thank you for what you did,
Oh, you're
though.
welcome,
I
and it
appreciate
certainly
it.
is a balancing act to figure out what is, the right thing to do. But I don't want to repeat ourselves too much, but the neighbors don't seem to have an objection to it. Any compliance with, well requirements will, of course, be done with the appropriate authorities, too. We do apologize for the miscalculation. Time flies when you're
I
having fun.
understand,
I think
but,
we didn't
you
realize
know,
how long
from
it
our
had been.
point
But
of
that-
view, we're trying to gather
Yes.
information, and we appreciate you
Well,
coming
this
back
really
and
did-
being so thorough. That was very helpful.
Good, this really did clarify for us as well.
Can I just clarify one thing? There is public sewer there, though?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Just something to consider.
Thank you.
Although I said that we wouldn't go back and revisit old information. How big is the house going to be again?
Well, we're flexible on that, really. It can be,
Excuse me, we had actually agreed as a condition that we would agree to cap it out at 2,400. I think the application had said a range. So that would be where they would do it. And we would also point out that it is a two-story house, so the footprint on the lot is, based on a two-story footprint, so it'll be smaller even though the square footage is higher.
But that did not count the garage, correct?
oh, it did.
That-
for
It was
footprint.
only
I
living
believe that it-
space.
No, I think it
I
did.
believe that it did count the
Oh, it
garage.
did count,
Yeah,
okay.
I believe it
Thank
did.
you.
And what about the lot, the total of the 4 lots together? What are we talking about?
Excuse me, it's 14,000.
14,000.
Pardon me.
Pat, you want some water? Want some water?
Yes.
Oh, so are a couple. Yeah, 14.
Make sure it's not
Kathy, did you have a question? You have a
Sorry, no,
question?
my question was answered. Thank you.
Okay. Tom, do you have anything?
Yeah. Pat, you gave us the list of 3 homes that got variances on Hillside, 4th Street. Mine's listed for 5th Street, that's where you want to put the home.
Yes.
I'm looking. My dad had to tell me to put my microphone on.
Speaking,
When I'm looking at what was on 5th Street, the list you gave us, one really hit me because, man, it's pretty close to my birthday, 1937. That was on 5th Street. And then you have 1979, 1950, 1968, 1995, and 1968. Nothing showed from the year after 1995 on 5th Street. And you're saying all the neighbors are for this and all neighbors think it's the best thing since 7-Up. But I can't see where you're showing me anything on 5th Street. You're showing me Hillside Avenue. You're showing me a letter from Stan who said that the reason why he got city water because his well went dry. And I was hoping he'd show up because I wanted to question him a little bit on some of his statements. But unfortunately, he's not here. But thank you for the nice job you did.
Okay. I think, certainly the people that already had homes built on Fifth Street don't need to build they're not building a new home. So we're dealing with properties where, the lots hadn't been built on. And of course, we're dealing with present day, zoning requirements. So again, we did the 4 streets to show, again, a surrounding neighborhood, not just the Fifth Street.
Well, I understand, but the 6 that I gave you were all on 5th Street.
That's true.
From 37 on. So those homes have been there for a couple years.
A few years, yes.
Yes. Well, I don't like to say that because I told you it's pretty close to my birthday. so.
Yes.
Thanks, Pat.
You're welcome.
only 2 that are over.
The issue that I'm having, just so that you know, is one of the elements for the variance under the law is, and I'll just read it, because of such physical circumstances or conditions, there is no possibility that the property can be developed in strict conformity with the provisions of the zoning ordinance, and that the authorization of a variance is therefore necessary to enable the reasonable use of the property. And the question I think that Tom was going to, and that Joyce was going to, and that Bob was going to, is this concept of, is the building too big for the lot? And obviously, there are certain buildings that have smaller square footage, but from your perspective, Mrs. Tabor, is the 2,400 square foot building required because it's the only thing that can sell there? Or is it the only thing that you can make money with? Or is it the only thing that ultimately will attract potential buyers? I mean, I just don't know what the motivation for the larger house is on a smaller lot.
Well, I think that, you know, in large part, you know, that's it. There are some homes here, amazingly, like 305 Hillside, 16,000 square foot lot, which is a little bit bigger than one we have. It's got a 952-foot home. There are very few people who would buy a 952 square foot
Isn't there a
home
reality
today.
show about that now or something like
I'm
that?
sure there's a
where they-
reality show
where
about
they live
everything.
in
Tiny
this
houses.
little box house or
Yeah.
something like that?
I hope you're not going to go by that for house.
No, I haven't seen it. I've only heard about it.
And you can see, you know, you know, that there are a lot of smaller homes there, but I believe that, you know, we are talking about, you know, what in our present day is considered a reasonable sized home and a reasonable use there. Do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I don't know, I mean, I don't know if it's relevant or not, but whether it's a smaller or larger home, we can meet the side setbacks, you know, side-to-side setbacks with the property. The property allows for us to meet that, whether it's a 1,500 square foot house or a 2,400 square foot house, we're still going to need probably the same relief from the front and the back setbacks, because the lot is so shallow. It's only 100 feet deep. They're all only 100 feet deep back there, and there's, you know, so either way, I'm still gonna have to.
Doesn't matter in essence,
it's-
is what you're saying.
Well, you know, I can meet the side setbacks, but I still need the front and back relief, so if that, I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't even know if that's relevant, but that's the
No,
problem,
it's good
really,
by
with that,
analogy. Sure.
you know, with that lot. That creates the issue that makes it impossible.
Right, well, that's the key in the variance law, which is if the lot is such that it cannot be developed, then there should be some form of relief. The question is whether that relief is to build a McMansion or to build, in essence, a house that would be more suitable for that lot. That's the real dilemma.
Yeah.
And what you're suggesting is it really doesn't matter if you make it 1,500 square feet or 2,400 square feet,
You have a lot
because
of
you
side
still
yard.
have the issues.
Right, and you still have a lot of side yard. I mean, the lot itself doesn't meet the zoning of 50 and 60 feet. For front and rear setbacks is 110 feet. The lot itself, without a building on it, I couldn't put a stick on it legally at this moment.
And I come back to the fact that we are talking about a two-story home too. So again, the footprint is going to be the same as it would be for the smaller home. It's just going to be raised.
Elevated.
Elevated.
Okay. Other questions, anyone?
I know this is a question that was, I think, asked and probably answered, but I don't see it in my notes. How close is public water to this property?
It is about, I believe when I run it, I would have to run it all the way to the end of the property, which would be about 340 feet. And
That's it.
when I ran at 140, I think we had to run it at one point less than 200 feet, and it was
You mean on a different property?
on a different property. And 10 years ago, it was, you know, cost prohibitive, like about $29,000 to run it then. I don't think it's gotten cheaper since then. I'm guessing.
I'm sure it hasn't.
Any other questions, anyone? Anything you want to say at this point? We'll
No,
we'll
I
ask the audience if there's anybody in the audience who has anything that
I
they want
promised
to say
to
as
be
well.
brief, so I'm going to leave it at that.
You've tried very hard. It's been us who have not allowed that. Anyone in the audience who has anything that they want to contribute to this discussion? None? Any closing remarks you want to make?
No, other than, you know, I appreciate the remarks that were tonight, the questions and the compliments on the exhibit. I think that does clarify, not only clarified it for us, but I hope it clarifies for the board that we are not out of keeping with the neighborhood, and we are doing our best to keep it reasonable, but we do need the relief.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for the water.
Thanks for your time.
Take care.
So I think the board has, in essence, decided to defer this, and we'll let you know, obviously, because we have such a full agenda.
We assume that.
So we'll get back to you on where things are.
And if we could be excused, we
Right.
figured you were busy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Favor. The next item on here You ready for this one?
Yep.
Okay. Kathy, do you want to read the next item?
Z 1413 J and K Excavating, 730 Grandview Avenue, Norristown 19403. The applicant is requesting a variance from R1 zoning district standard 143-32 to permit an outdoor storage / general contractor use on the property, and from 143-33 to permit an impervious coverage of 57%. The parcel ID of this subject property is 430012-058-004. Subject property is located at 3471 Ridge Pike, Lower Providence, and is in the R1 residential district.
Thank you.
I presume that you're Mr. Shackwitz?
Correct.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
You saw how this went before. We're somewhat informal, although we'll reel you back in if we get too informal. Obviously, you know how this plays out. Any witnesses have to speak verbally as opposed to nodding heads, doing a wink, anything of that sort, so that the court reporter, our famous Paula Nazaros, can get those remarks down on her stenographer machine. So please adhere to those rules, and we'll be out of here quickly. So with that, you're welcome to provide any sort of opening remarks that you want to make and summarize for the board what you're trying to accomplish.
You bet. Thank you very much, Mr. Solicitor. My name is David Shapkowitz. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, J&K Excavating, and Kevin Dupel. Before we get started, I did have a couple of housekeeping matters. As the solicitor is probably aware, we had written a letter about a particular issue, potentially involving the need for a board member to recuse themselves. I don't know if you had the opportunity, Mr. McLennan, to look into that, and if any conclusion was reached on that request.
Yes, and I did poll the board in executive session, and no one on the board is related to the family that is objecting,
Okay.
represented by Mr. Sheridan.
That was our request, and I appreciate that.
I would point out that I do have, or my wife has, I should say, a nephew who lives on Grange Avenue. I have not talked to him about this. I don't know what his feelings are on it, and if Chris or Julie is in the audience and going to testify today, I don't see them back there, but if their names do come up in any way, then I will recuse myself. But as I said, I'm unfamiliar with their feelings on this matter, so at this time, I'm going to stay on the board.
You are or you aren't familiar?
Unfamiliar, he said.
Unfamiliar, okay.
Unfamiliar.
Mr. Hart, thank you for that explanation. Appreciate it.
And can I make a comment too? You won't find a fairer board member than Mr. Hart.
I'm not worried at all. But we were asked to bring the issue up, and I appreciate Mr. Flynn looking into it. The second piece of housekeeping we have tonight is that we did a little bit more digging on our request for the impervious surface variance. As it turns out,
No pun intended, I presume, from that?
never. Only puns intended. What we're going to do is request if the board can consider our request for a variance if it's needed, or potentially now also consider the potential for an interpretation of the zoning ordinance, which seems to indicate that we are proposing gravel as part of the development of the site, and gravel is listed as pervious surface in the township's ordinances, which would reduce our impervious cover to 8% of the site. And we have we'll present the board with a revised site plan indicating that, and we'll provide testimony along those ordinance provisions. So what we're requesting the board to consider potentially an amendment to our application that allow the board to interpret those provisions and see if it actually applies. And then alternatively, if necessary, if it doesn't, then we obviously our request for variance would remain.
Sure.
The map that you've provided us with shows several areas that are proposed area of stone paving. Are you suggesting that that is not going to be stone paving, it's going to be gravel? Is that the difference?
That is correct.
Thank you.
We are
I'm just
going
trying
to
to clarify.
present you with revised plans, and maybe what I can do, if you think it's appropriate, we prepared a packet of the slides for the board. Maybe I can, if it's
Sure,
easier,
that
I'll
would be
just hand
helpful,
those
yes.
up. And then as we testify as to them, we'll have them marked. for purposes of the.
That would work, yes. Please.
Yeah, really. More trees. It's not us.
Okay, now with the housekeeping behind us. As I stated, my name is David Chafkowitz. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, J&K Excavating and Kevin Dupel, which are the equitable owners of a parcel of property known as 3471 Ridge Pike. Just for reference purposes, the board has in front of them a packet that shows two aerials. The second aerial specifically identifies where on Ridge Pike the property is located. The property is almost 2 acres, or just over 2 acres in size. It is currently vacant. It has frontage on Ridge Pike on Grange Avenues. The property is currently zoned R1. The applicant is requesting a variance to permit an outdoor storage and general contractor use on the property, and we will talk more about that as the application progresses.
Sorry to interrupt you. Is that microphone working? Okay, I just want to make sure, because obviously this is being videotaped or displayed
Not on TV.
live.
Yes,
You're on
Yeah, sure,
TV, you're a
yeah.
star.
Channel 963.
Total audience of 960.
Now you're flattering yourself.
Yeah, right, I know. Right, there you go. As the board may or may not be aware, J&K Excavating is a currently operating business in the township of Lower Providence. Mr. DeBell, who is the principal of J&K Excavating, as you will hear, has been looking for a property to buy to relocate his business. He's been looking for several years and has, believe it or not, had quite difficulty finding a suitable piece of property within Lower Providence Township, but is committed to the township and spent the time to find this particular property at issue. So what we are doing today is bringing the application based on some of the history and some of the work that our planner has done in determining whether or not the property is suitable for a variance, and in particular the use variance. As you'll hear from our expert planner, Mr. Stephen Ware, the property of the history is the history of the property is quite interesting and quite unique. For purposes of what was interesting to me is hearing the application previously. What we have here is a property that's actually oversized for purposes of the R1 zoning district in almost 2 acres. Which also prevents it from being subdivided into smaller lots to allow for potentially a reasonable use of the property. It's also located, as we discussed, on frontage on Ridge Pike, which is a major artery in the township. And more interestingly, it's actually a property that's surrounded by several mixed uses, several non-conforming lots, several non-conforming uses within the township. And I also understand that it may even be subject now to some potential rezoning of the area as well. So it seems that the application we're bringing tonight may actually be very consistent with not only the surrounding area, but also with the future plans for this area of the municipality. It's also our understanding that at least since 1972 or 74, the property has been vacant. It has been marketed on and off for a number of years without any success. And it's been marketed as a single-family home, or for the possibility of a single-family home. Our testimony tonight will be that based on the years of marketing the property and some of the other factors we'll discuss, the property is not usable as a single-family residence in this market. And as a result, it would be suitable for a variance. As I mentioned, with me tonight are our contract purchaser and applicant, Kevin Dupel, principal of J&K, and Steve Ware, our site design and planning consultant. And Mr. McLean, if the board doesn't have any other questions on the opening, we'll be happy to get started, because I know you have a tight agenda.
Yes, we're ready. Of course, you know, Mr. Shakowitz, about the fact that the Olsons, who live close by, do have an objection. We will get to, of course, the people who have objections, if any are here. And Mr. Sheridan has asked that we, in essence, hold the hearing open so that his client can produce their evidence and testimony in October, which is permissible under the MPC, the Municipalities Planning Code. So the board has already decided, essentially, to provide that, because, of course, as you may know, we like to have people try their cases on the merits and have everybody have their day in court. So that's what's going to happen tonight. I would suggest, or at least direct I should say, direct or at least suggest that your folks be available, of course, in October, because then the record's still open. They should be here for purposes of whether hearing it and/or being asked questions regarding it, so that due process can prevail.
The only thing I would ask in that regard is that obviously, as you were mentioning, that we have the right to offer either rebuttal witnesses and obviously cross-examine if they're
Of course.
presented. The
So
only
with
other-
that caveat,
No problem.
the show's yours.
The only other question I would ask, Mr. McClellan, just along those lines, and maybe not to prevent anybody from speaking with regard to the application, but the nature of our application is to present our case and then let a party present theirs. Do we hold the public comment until all that's done? Maybe just something to consider in light of your agenda for tonight. Having said that, Mr. Ware? I guess you get to be sworn.
Paula, can you do the honors, please?
Stephen F. Ware, W-A-R-E. I do.
You're welcome to be seated. You don't have to stand. since we're
He was going to
recording.
pass out my CV for your
What
reference.
I'm going to do, Mr. Ware,
Okay.
is ask you, mark as applicant's exhibit A1 and ask you what to identify this document for me.
Okay, I have the same thing right here. This is my attempt to summarize a 30-plus years as a professional planner on one sheet of paper. The second page is simply a list of some of the municipalities which I have been previously qualified as an expert witness in professional land planning and related services.
So, Mr. Ware, why don't we just, to make this a little quicker, can you give the board the benefit of your educational background?
Yes, I'm a graduate of Gettysburg College. I also attended Temple University, Drexel University, and Philadelphia College of Art, when it used to be Philadelphia College of Art, not the new name. I'm a certified planner, in the American Institute of Certified Planners, which is a certifying body for professional land planners in all the United States. And although it doesn't apply here, I am a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, which is the only state that has their own licensing of professional planners. I've been in planning since around 1978. I spent nearly 25 years at the Martin Architectural Group as Vice President of Planning, working all over the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, other parts of the country, running a rather large firm doing that. I left there in 2003 to start my own practice, to focus on the type of projects I really like to do, which tend to be more complicated, infill, all sorts of innovative things, as well as town centers, walkable communities, transit-oriented development, things of that nature. And so I've been on my own now since 2003. Any other questions?
I think you covered some of them, but you do have a professional certifications or licenses?
Yes, the AICP certification is the certification for planners in the United States.
And you have testified before and have been recognized as an expert in planning before municipal boards and zoning?
Yeah, the second page has a list of 14. There are actually probably more than that, but there's some of the more local ones.
Mr. McClellan, unless the board has any questions of Mr. Ware, I'd like to ask the board to consider recognizing Mr. Ware as an expert in land planning and site design.
No problem. Before we pass on that, is there anyone in the audience who's here on this petition or this application? Does anybody have any questions for this expert or this gentleman before I qualify?
At least I'm a gentleman, right?
Any questions about his qualifications? That's how this process typically works. You have the opportunity to examine him with respect to whether he is in fact an expert or not. Any other questions? Board that believe accepts him as an expert? Thank you, Mr. Ware.
Thank you.
Mr. Ware, maybe it might be a good time to ask you to approach the easel and ask if you're familiar with the subject property, and maybe on the first aerial in the packet that's provided, if we can mark as applicant's exhibit
Yeah,
E.
we don't have large size. Those are just 1117.
Okay, you can reference the aerial.
Yeah, the
on
one up
board.
there.
What I'd like to do, Mr. McClellan, is if we can mark our first aerial as applicant's exhibit A2, which is the first one in the packet, and then we'll mark the second aerial as applicant's exhibit A3. And Mr. Ware, if you can you identify those two aerials for the board?
Yes, going back to the first aerial, please. Aerial 1. That shows the intersection of Ridge Pike and Grange. I was at the meeting here last night for the new plan. I was passing pointers around, but I brought my own. Anyway, our parcel is right here at the corner of North Grange and Ridge. It's approximately that area, a little bigger than 2 acres. There's some single-family houses here. There's a landscape business here that accesses off of Ridge Pike. There's a motel across the street. As we get further away, there's a variety of mixed uses that have occurred because of the evolution of Ridge Pike and 422 historically over time.
And Mr. Ware, can you briefly describe the property to the board?
The property is flat. It has various trees on it. When you get to the rendering of the site plan, you'll see that we are going to do extensive buffering, fencing, landscaping and stuff, and we will save as many good trees as we can. Trees will have to be evaluated to see what quality they are.
And Mr. Ware, what are the dimensions of this property?
That I'll have to look at the site plan for you. The minimum dimension is around 325 feet wide, and it's 87,120 square feet, and the depth of the property is around 258 feet on the short side. It's kind of a trapezoidal property. The side on Grange Avenue is slightly longer than the side over here.
And how is the property currently zoned?
It's currently zoned R1 residential.
And I believe you covered some of the physical characteristics related to the property. You started to talk a little bit about the surrounding neighborhood. Can you talk a little bit more in detail?
Well, I'll try and summarize it quickly. You're all familiar with the history of Ridge Pike as being a main thoroughfare and basically connecting Eagleville and Collegeville and so forth. And gradually over time, the nature of the development along Ridge Pike tended to be a very mixed use of all types of uses, commercial, shopping centers, automobile places, things like that, and some residential as well.
How do you, with regard to the nature of the surrounding uses, how do you characterize them?
Very mixed, and not, as you drive down the road, you don't suddenly approach a point and say, this looks like an R1 residential neighborhood. It has a very mixed street character. Most of the properties have access, ingress, and egress on Ridge Pike. There are very many of those. There are very many properties, and there's actually 3 sections. There's the eastern end, and then there's the center where we are, and then you have the swath of park going through, and then you have the west end that was the subject of part of the presentation last night with the plan.
And as you reviewed some of the properties and the uses that surround our location, how do you characterize them as they relate to the R1 zoning district?
Well, it appears that a lot of the properties have basically had the R1 zoning district criteria as it stands now dropped upon them because there are very many of them that appear, number one, are not residential uses. There are also some very small lots that are included in the R1. And when we get to the zoning map, you can see that more easily, or even the second aerial photograph might show that.
Okay. And you started to talk about some of the commercial uses that are along Ridge Pike in the vicinity of this property. Can you point to
Well,
that?
for instance, we have a motel right here, which has access off of Ridge and I think off of Grange. This is a landscaping business that apparently has, I believe, customers and the public coming and going. I'm not sure if they actually sell materials, but there's a lot of activity there, and it's accessed directly off of Ridge, and basically looks like it's the rear of a very long, narrow, deep lot.
And as you go along Ridge Pike and what look like some of the residential uses along that side, how do they comply with the general dimensional criteria of the R1 district?
It appears from looking at the zoning map that there are many of those lots that would not meet the 65,000 square feet and must have been pre-existing non-conforming lots under the current zoning.
And as you travel further along Ridge Pike, are there other characters of uses in that area?
Again, it's a mix of uses, of some commercial, some professional services, retail, automotive services and things.
Now, you also mentioned that our property obviously has frontage along Ridge Pike. do you believe that the nature of the surrounding uses has or can impact this property?
Well, I think it can in the point that this lot, as you mentioned, is an oversized lot. And in order to do a single-family detached home, which is basically the only permitted use in the R1 zone, you would have to do one home on a 2-acre lot. And it would have to have access off of ridge where the entrance is right now. And with this size lot, the problem is it's bigger than the 65,000, but it's not big enough to subdivide into 2 single-family lots, because then they would both be undersized, and they would have to have, at least one would always have to have access off of ridge. So you have a lot that's neither, just kind of in between. And based on the other properties in the area and the historic development of the housing types, I don't think that marketing a large enough house for this type of lot would be feasible, and which is probably why it's been on sale for a very long time.
So you're reached the conclusion that based on the size of the lot and what's permitted in the zoning district, is the property subdividable for more than one residential use?
No, not without variances.
So a variance would be required to reduce the lot size to actually meet the minimum requirement?
No, actually, it would be below minimum, because 65,000 is required. If you take the 87,000 divided by 2, you're under 65 on both lots. So you'd have 2 lots, creating 2 non-conforming lots that were substandard in terms of lot size.
Even at subdividing the parcel into 2 equal lots of about 40,000 square feet, is that still consistent with the surrounding neighborhood?
There are an awful lot of other, I'd say, pre-existing small lots, and there are single-family houses that front directly, have access directly off of ridge. There also is a development down here and over this way that may back on ridge but does not have direct access from ridge, because ridge has just an enormous amount of curb cuts and access ways and things.
So it seems like that based on the zoning of this property as R1, based on the fact that it can't be subdivided and a house would have to be built on the 80,000 square foot lot, do you think that a house is viable on this particular lot?
And again, we can't let economics in the marketplace dictate it, but it's been on sale for a number of years, a number of times, and I do not see it as a good place for a single-family detached lot. And I have essentially over 30 years of experience, especially in the area of housing.
Now, you were talking about the impact of Ridge Pike. Why do you believe Ridge Pike would impact this property as a single-family home?
Well, it's a heavily traveled road. It has a lot of curb cuts, a lot of multiple curb cuts serving the same parking areas, things of that nature. It's just not, it's the only area I could find that actually is zoned R1 and abuts both sides of ridge. All the other R1 properties are removed from that, which I find quite curious.
So what it looks like you're testifying to is that we have a relatively unique surrounding neighborhood as it relates to this particular lot.
Yes,
correct?
due to the evolution over an extended period of time of 100, 200 years from when it was a little tiny road.
That you also have a parcel that's located on what you're characterizing as a major roadway in the township.
Yes, absolutely.
And that you have a zoning that requires at least 1.5 acres for this particular house.
Yes, approximately 65,000 square feet.
And do those factors help you reach an opinion as to whether or not this lot is suitable for a single-family residence?
In my opinion, it is not suitable for a single-family residence, and if that is the intent, I think it's going to be on the market for a very, very long time.
Thank you, Mr. Ware. So you believe that it's these factors alone, these factors, that do impact the marketability of the house?
Yes, absolutely. Just as a point of reference, some of the other developments that show on the zoning map and stuff appear to be like clustered subdivisions or conservation subdivisions where they have a large amount of open space and clustered housing and things, which is very nice. But that is not directly fronting on ridge, and there are buffers and things. Whereas we're right there on the street and on Grange, right out in the open with a flat site.
And with regard to the uses that are permitted in the R1 zoning district, besides a single-family house or unit, what else is permitted in the
That's
district?
essentially it, except for accessory structures like garages, decks, things of that nature, and some other type of a wood-burning thing. I'm not quite sure what that is in the ordinance.
So there's
but
no
that's a
other-
conditional use.
There's no other use permitted by right in the zoning ordinance besides
No.
a single-family home?
No.
So, turning a little bit to the site plan, you are familiar with what the applicant then is proposing for this site?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we take the opportunity to show your site plan, which I think we'll
Okay.
be marking as applicant's exhibit A4.
Okay. There we go. Okay, this is our site plan. Oh, come on. All right, good. Yeah, right after.
Can you blow this up a little bit? Can you make this display a little larger, please? Over here, maybe on the AV.
Let me get my chart since the statistics just left it. Anyhow, what we have here is our 87,120 square foot lot. North Grange is here, Ridge Pike, alternate 422 is here. The current access to the site is this piece of impervious surface right here. There's a Pico power pole right there.
Excuse me, can I interrupt just for a second? Could you use the microphone?
sorry.
I think that
I'm
some
sorry.
people back there couldn't hear.
A4.
What was three?
3 was, there was 2 aerials. A3 was the second aerial in the package.
The CV was one, and then the two aerials. Here, does this, actually, this come out? There we go, that makes it
So
better.
the song and the dance.
Yeah, wow, but I've still got to do my pointer. Anyhow,
Now we got the.
all right, we've got 2 acres, 87,120 square feet. And the interesting thing,
Before you get into too much detail,
Oh.
Steve, let's take this opportunity to discuss the question that was brought earlier about the impervious surface.
okay,
The plan that was submitted showed a paved area. What on this plan has changed with regard to the impervious surface?
well, the entire area that you see here, which in actuality on the drawing is kind of a tan, but it has this hatch pattern, is gravel area. It is not impervious paving. And it was called out before as being, I believe, 49,000 some square feet of that, which would cause an increase over the impervious surface coverage. But when you look at the site now, the only impervious surface coverage, in my opinion, based on your definition in the ordinance, is the existing entryway out here and what will be the 3,200 square foot building footprint of the 40 by 80 building. The rest of the gravel would be considered pervious coverage.
And you believe that's the definition provided in the township's ordinance?
Yes, it is.
Can you, do you have the section that you can reference?
It's under definitions, impervious surfaces, those surfaces which do not absorb water. All buildings, parking areas, driveways, roads, sidewalks, and any areas in concrete and asphalt shall be considered impervious surfaces within this definition. Porous paving materials used in parking lots, driveways, or other applications may be excluded from this definition following review and approval by the Board of Supervisors.
So the use of gravel, as far as your understanding, it would comply with that definition as pervious surface?
Yes, because impervious surface, the water would be running off, usually in a sheet flow, because you've got a paved area. With gravel, the water would be going more directly into the ground, which is more desirable.
And based on the use of gravel as a pervious surface for this particular property, how does it reduce the impervious cover?
Well, it reduces it by a considerable amount. It's down, basically, we have 4% coverage for our building footprint, and another 4%, which would be the area out here, is very similar in size to the building footprint. So you're looking at a total impervious coverage of 8%.
And so it's your opinion that the applicant does not need to request a variance to permit an excessive amount of impervious cover?
Yes, based on the definition in the ordinance.
Now let's discuss what's being proposed. How would you describe the use as depicted on the site plan?
Well, I was calling it just equipment storage. I know on the application it had some of it. It was very hard to really categorize this because essentially it's storing the excavating equipment and so forth overnight and weekends and things. The applicant can explain how the business actually works. It has normal daytime hours and very few people involved coming and going.
Well, based on what your understanding of the use in the category you mentioned, is there a similar use category or a
I
particular
really
use
couldn't find any category that covered this anywhere else in the ordinance.
So
I
in
mean,
per-
you're looking at things like just storage area and other things, warehousing. There was nothing that seemed to quite fit this category.
So we're not sure, for example, where this use may be permitted in the township?
Correct. I did not see anything that definitively said, yes, this is our use.
Okay. And the site plan that we've marked as a applicant's exhibit A4, this is a site plan that you prepared? Is that correct?
Yes, it did.
And can you explain to the board now in more detail what it depicts?
Okay, well, what we're doing is, we have set our building basically in the center of the site. We have a fence, a decorative fence and gates here, emergency gate on Grange, fences all the way around. The larger trees are places where we think maybe we can save existing trees. The smaller trees will be the evergreen buffer that will be filled in, and if necessary, filled in completely if the other trees are not of quality or caliber that they should be saved or could be saved. The building is going to be a metal type of building with a metal roof. It's going to be 1 story. We'll probably have access doors in the ends and on the front for getting pieces of equipment in and out and moving them around. The primary entrance and exit will be here on Ridge, where it already has the not a curb cut, but the paved area. And in terms of criteria, if you look, there's a small line here. It's easy to see on your paper plans. And that is the actual setbacks that are required in the R1 district. And this is a corner lot, so it requires 2 front yards. So this is a front yard here, which is 50 feet on the plan, and this is a front yard on Grange, which is also 50 feet. The side yard is 50 feet on this side, and then you have to have a rear yard. Since this is chosen as side, this is rear, you need 60 feet. We have 100 on our rear yard. So anyhow, where we would need 50 and 50 and 50 and 60, we have front yard of 115 minimum because of the strange shape of the lot, 125 feet plus or minus for the side yard, and the rear yard is 100 feet plus or minus. We well exceed any of the setback criteria for the R1 zone, and I think you'll see that with our exhibits coming up, how far away the building actually is and the visibility from the road and the surrounding properties.
Now, I noticed on the plan that we've categorized the fence as looks like an 8-foot chain link.
Yes, but we're thinking in terms of something that would have the decorative green woven structure so that you can't see through it except maybe at the gate. That hasn't been determined, but it will be a nice look. It's not going to be a split rail fence or something like that. It will be a screen.
Has the applicant also considered the possibility of a vinyl privacy fence?
Yes, exactly. And the idea is by having all the buffering and landscaping on the outside of the fence, and it sets the fence back about 15 feet from the property line on this side and the other 3 sides. The front it's set back farther. It gives you a chance in the front here to do some landscape berming as well. So you have a mixture of berming and the evergreen buffer and whatever existing trees can be saved at the front entrance, and then the very thorough landscape screening and buffering between the fence and the other landscape materials on the other 3 sides.
Now, is this a landscape plan that is otherwise required by the township zoning ordinance? Or is this some that you prepared?
No, the buffering would be required between uses, I believe, and this, I believe it's a 15-foot buffer. I'm not sure on that. But this is the way we intend to do it, to make, this is a relatively low-intensity use. And by screening and protecting it like that, it makes it stay low intensity and low visibility, and essentially a good neighbor considering that it's not a residential use.
Okay. Now, I understand that in our next slide, you had prepared some visuals that would be able to depict
Yes,
what the property would look like from the road.
yes.
And I believe,
There's,
starting with,
well, we can start with any one.
let's start with this one, and we'll mark it as applicant's exhibit A5.
Okay.
And maybe you can identify this for the
Yes,
board?
this is Ridge Pike right here. This is that little island, this is the existing paving, and this is a Pico pole that unfortunately is right there at the front, but that's existing. What you're seeing here, this is where you have the largest view of the building due to the gate and the opening. The building is there, set back in the site. We're planning on giving it a color treatment. There's so much green with the landscaping, it may be like a teal blue roof, something environmentally pleasing to the eye. We'll do some additional plantings on this little island, whatever the island will sustain. And then you can see the fence, which is solid, and over here you'll see berming and landscaping. Over here, berming and landscaping over toward the corner. And so this, at this angle, these are the gates right here that will open. It's a 30-foot gate opening, two 15-foot gates, and that is the primary way in and out. The other exit is emergency egress only.
Why don't we, moving to the next slide, I think we have another view from Ridge Pike, if I remember.
Yeah, okay, this is,
Well,
this,
before we get started, Mr. Ware, we're gonna mark this one as applicant exhibit A6.
okay, this,
Any attention to identify it for the board?
yes, this is Ridge Pike, and the corner of Grange is right here. So this is at the intersection essentially. And here you can see there's that Pico pole I was identifying in the other slide, and the entrance is set back in there. These are essentially existing trees and then our additional buffering and landscaping. There's another pole here and various other poles. There you see the fence turning the corner and going around on Grange, and again, we'll have the landscape and buffering there. But the important thing about this is from this intersection, and until you actually get to the main entrance, that is the only piece of building that you will really see.
And is this plan to take the buffering, the berming also that you were?
Yes, there's berming here and berming there. The berming will be done wherever there's actually physically room to do a berm, which requires a certain width and so forth to get the necessary grades.
And Mr. Ware, these two slides were prepared under your supervision?
Yes, absolutely.
And let's move to what we'll call as applicant's exhibit A7.
Okay, this
Can you
is,
identify this for the?
yes, this is on North Grange looking south. So here the property is on that side. This is the area that would be the emergency egress only, and we're still not sure what the material is. We're planning on like gravel here or whatever. We're still not sure if it's emergency only, if it even has to have that. But anyhow, there you see the fence and the gate, the emergency gate here. There's some of the existing trees, and then supplemented by our landscaping elements along there. And again, they would also be along the back side of the property and the other far side of the property. So this is the view looking towards the intersection of Grange and Ridge.
So when you talk about emergency access,
Mhm.
explain to the board and explain to the public what that exactly means.
Well, I would think that the main reason for that is if there was a reason to get a piece of equipment out there very quickly, and for some reason, say there was an accident on Ridge or some type of a traffic problem that couldn't be done, and they would have to go out the other way. I don't think it would be used on a regular basis to bring things in and out.
So the main ingress and egress point would be on Ridge Pike?
Right, where the existing ingress actually and egress actually exists now, even though it doesn't go to anything.
Now, are you familiar with what type of outdoor storage is being proposed for the site?
Yes, as it said, it's a prefabricated metal building that will have
Will
some,
be, stored outside?
well, some equipment stored in it and some equipment stored outside on the gravel area.
Are you aware if any building material will be stored on the site?
I don't believe so, because this is an excavating business. They are in the business of storing equipment, then getting it to a job site, using it, and then bringing it back for storage.
Any retail component to this particular use?
No, this will not be open to the public or the retail or have any kind of a customer component at all.
Okay. Now, I believe we were talking previously, and you were referencing the zoning map in the township to illustrate some of the previously. I think we have a slide that will help illustrate that as well.
There are two slides.
If not, we can use the,
Well-
those are the only ones?
There was an overall zoning map and then a detail of the zoning map.
And I believe the overall zoning map is provided with the board's
Right,
exhibit.
both of them are in the board packets.
And the overall zoning map, Mr. McLean, I don't know if we need to mark as an exhibit or just, or can take judicial notice of, saying it's directly from the zoning ordinance. If you have a preference, we could just mark it as I think we're up to A7 or A8.
Mark it for continuity purposes.
Sure, sounds great. We'll mark this as applicant's exhibit A8, and Mr. Ware can just identify it for the board.
Yes, this is your zoning map taken, downloaded from the website and printed out. The interesting thing with this is if you look here at the Ridge corridor, which starts over here at Eagleville and goes all the way over here heading toward Collegeville, in this swath, there's a very large area of R2 residential zoning on this part of town. Along Ridge, there's a mixture of a whole bunch of uses and zones and even some overlays and things, I think, that create a very mixed environment all the way along until you get down to the park. Then, of course, you have the green space, open space, but then again, you pick up the very mixed environment over here at the west end, which was a point of discussion at the meeting last night. And the interesting thing here is, as far as I can tell, with the R1 here dropping down through the middle, these properties right here are the only R1 properties that actually front on Ridge Pike. The other R1 is set back from it. And the other point is that this piece of R1 is obviously very, very small lots and must have been pre-existing. There's another area down here that looks like it's clustering of some sort, some other smaller lots. It's very difficult. Some smaller lots along here, some which front on Ridge, and some which are accessed by another road.
I'm sorry, that's really hard. Can you use that?
Oh, okay, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Now that we've got that, that's fine.
I thought you can also, you have the blow up too.
Yeah. But anyhow, here's Ridge running across.
Bigger, it's pretty hard to see this. Can you blow it up a little bit? Thank you.
Yeah, you all right, we know what's over here in the east. It's very mixed uses of some highway commercial, retail, all sorts of things as you're coming down the pike. Then you hit the area here, we're right here, the municipal complex. Then you hit the area of R1, which goes from up here by Germantown, the township line, all the way down a swath through the middle of the township, and it gets very narrow down here below Ridge. But the thing I'm pointing out is that these properties here are the only R1 properties that actually front or back directly on Ridge Pike. All the other ones are set back and are conservation subdivision, things of that nature. And a lot of these just appear to the eye, since we're here and we're 2 acres, are definitely under the 65,000 square footage. It must have been pre-existing when that 65,000 square footage criteria came into play.
And Mr. Ware, on this map, you had mentioned earlier that there was some commercial uses and a motel, I think.
Right, the motel is right across the street over here. I believe this kind of strange zigzag-shaped lot. And there's also that landscape business is, I believe, this relatively narrow, deep lot right there, which is just one row off of the lots that are on Grange Avenue. It's essentially in their backyard. It shows up as a white building on the aerials.
So is there any conforming lots, residential lots of this size or this caliber on that front of Ridge Pike?
Well, this one where the motel is apparently also has a house on it or something. I mean, that's a very large lot. A couple other ones look pretty large, but there's all these that are small. These are smaller as well. It's basically, these are developed here and here, and the vacant one, this is vacant. I think this is probably also vacant, I'm not sure. And then this is like a conservation cluster subdivision back here, which has an open space requirement, things of that nature.
Now, I guess there probably would be this portion of the zoning or zoning map that we're referring to is the same one that we've added to the...
Right, that's the blow-up, which is basically this central area showing what you have is a swath of R2 and mixed uses, the swath of R1, then the park, and then the west end, which gets again into a mix of uses and other things.
And how do you believe that this mix of uses in this area of the R1 district impact this particular lot?
Well, obviously, it's become that over a time, an extended period of time, with development of all sorts of uses and changing ordinances, and some of them probably predate the zoning ordinance. But the bottom line is right now that based on driving down the road and what you see there, it doesn't appear to be a desirable place to have a 2-acre lot, which would require a relatively large square footage home based on the size of the lot.
Now, I also understand that you've done some research with regard to the history of the lot as well?
Oh, well, in looking at the aerial photography through the wonders of Google, you're able to go back historically. And the earliest photograph they have of this area is a black and white, I believe it's 1992. And all the images from then up until now, there's nothing on that lot. I don't know if there ever was a use on it prior to that, but...
Did you have an opportunity to review the tax records as well?
I pulled off the stuff from the county website.
And does the county website show that this particular lot's been owned by the same owner since 1974?
Yes.
And is there anything in the tax assessment records that indicate that an improvement was on the lot since that?
No, it was only reassessed when we had the countywide reassessment.
And are you familiar with the fact that this lot's been marketed over time?
Yes, for an extended period of time. I don't know exactly how long. The sign's out there right now.
And are you familiar with whether or not the owner has been successful in marketing it for a single-family home?
Well, obviously, he has not been successful. Just from seeing it.
Do you live in the township?
No, I don't.
You've driven by it a million times to see it? Is that?
I've driven by the area, yes.
Okay, so it's not as if someone told you that?
No, no, as far as I can tell, and looking at the historical aerials and stuff, there's never been anything on it. The for sale sign is up there now. I think the equitable owner might have an answer about how long it's been on the market. Apparently, it's been on and off several times.
Well, I'm just saying, although we don't rigorously follow the
Right,
rules of evidence,
right.
if you received it by hearsay.
No,
something that
no.
you don't necessarily.
No, but right now, the 2-acre for sale sign is sitting right there, and I personally do not know how long it's been there this time around.
So, as we discussed in summary for the board, for the public, there are several issues that you believe affect this particular property and its ability to be used as a single-family residence. Is that correct?
Yes.
And again, can you just summarize for the board those items?
Well, the basic one is that the evolution of Ridge Pike as a corridor with a wide variety of mixed uses and not the clear feeling of entering into an R1 residential district or neighborhood. You've got a busy highway with lots of curb cuts and access and parking lots right next to the road. So the surrounding neighborhood is not where you would look for a large lot, single-family detached home with access off of Ridge Pike, in my opinion.
And
And-
go ahead, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
as I mentioned, the lot is too large for one single-family detached, which would be permitted, and it's too small to subdivide into two without having variances. And basically, the R1 has such limited uses in its zone that it makes it unusable for permitted uses due to its strange size and shape and location. And therefore, we're trying to do something else that would work there and still have a minimal impact on the surrounding area.
Now, as you mentioned about the size and shape of the lot, do you believe that this property suffers from any particular hardship?
Well, the fact that the price for buying a 2-acre lot, in my opinion, would require a substantially sized single-family house.
And
And apparently, it's still for sale, so that no one has come forward yet.
And what do you believe that, and do you believe that hardship was created by the applicant?
No, it was created by when the R1 zoning district was revised and created I would assume, the 65,000 square foot lot and some of the other criteria.
So is there any other reasonable use of the property as it is currently zoned?
Not that I can tell, without going through a variance process for 2 lots or something of that nature, which might not necessarily meet the hardship standard.
So in your opinion, that in order for the lot to be used for any reasonable purpose, it would have to go through some variance process?
Absolutely.
Now, do you believe that based on that research and the work and the testimony you provided, the property can be developed in strict conformity with the existing zoning regs?
It exceeds all of the criteria with the exception of the permitted use. And that's what we're asking for relief from.
Now, I know you have provided some testimony with regard to the nature of the use, and the applicant is going to testify a little bit more, but based on what you've heard and your understanding of the use and your years as a planner in this particular field, do you believe that this use will alter the essential character of this neighborhood?
With the landscape and buffering stuff, I think it would actually improve the streetscape component of it, and the building will be small and set back quite a ways and won't show up very much.
Do I have to ask for people to refrain from comment or no?
I mean, one part of the plan they discussed last night at the meeting was doing landscaping and all that stuff along Ridge Pike as part of their future plan.
Okay. And do you believe that will this use proposed be detrimental to the public at large?
No, because it's very minimal use in terms of people coming and going and things coming and going. It's a very benign type use. It's not a very an active use with a lot of noise, things of that nature. And it will be screened in landscape, so you're not going to really see what's in there.
And how does this use comport with the proposed changes and items that you were seeing at the planning board meetings related to potential rezoning of the area?
Well, last night they're really focusing on the west end, but when you look at the document, they're basically covering the entire stretch of ridge to make it more commercial and more of a town center type feel, village type feel. It's very linear in nature, which can cause problems with trying to create a sense of place. But the zoning may be changing in this central area away from the R1 zoning, based on the report.
And do you believe that the applicant is seeking the minimum relief necessary to allow for reasonable use of the property?
Yes, I think it is, because we're exceeding all of the bulk criteria. We're doing enhanced landscaping. The only relief is for the use.
And do you offer the opinions with regard to these items with a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Yes, and the main thing is it takes what has been a vacant lot for many, many, many years and gets it back in a productive use, and we'll be paying taxes and create more revenues compared to a vacant, empty lot classified in the county records as 2+ acres of vacant lot.
I have nothing further, Mr. Ware. Mr. McLennan, I don't know if I should take the opportunity so I don't forget to move those exhibits into evidence that we had mentioned with Mr. Ware's testimony, but if the board has any questions of Mr. Ware at this point.
You certainly can move them now if you want. I don't know if you're going to tell us as well, if you want to.
No, he's gonna testify as well. I just have a tendency to forget that component of it.
Yes. Does anybody have any questions about the exhibits that he's moving for? Does anybody have an objection out there about these exhibits? They're really not terribly objectionable, but go ahead.
I got a statement and a question for Mr. Ware, is that permitted?
Well, not just yet, but about the exhibits initially. Anybody have any questions or?
Well, yeah, I guess it's a statement, so.
Would you mind coming up and
Yeah, you have to come up.
come up and say your name and swear, please?
My name's Dan Wilson, I live on Steinbright Drive. Dan Wilson, and I live on Steinbright Drive.
And you'll have to be sworn if you're going to enter any factual evidence into the record, so Paul.
Dan Wilson. Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N. I do. I only,
Trying to limit this now just to the exhibits.
right. So I only want to comment that the R1, that corridor has been improving over years, not going the other way, so I just want to say that.
But you don't have any objections to the exhibit per se?
Well, I just have objections to his
Testimony
comment.
you have an objection
Yes.
to, but not the exhibit.
Well, I'm including the testimony with the exhibit, so.
Yes, sir, come on up. Again, this is the exhibit. Do you have any problem with the exhibit itself?
And I guess I can just put it out there real quick.
You have to, again,
Sure.
identify yourself for us, I'm sorry.
My name is Kevin Dombay. I also live on Steinbright Drive. Dombay. I do. Okay, I guess my my only issue with the exhibit would be that he's, I believe, said several times that this all conforms to code. There would be no other variances requested by the exhibits entered. I would.
Again, that's
Okay.
to his testimony, not to the exhibit per se. I mean,
Okay.
The real question is, does that exhibit in any way provide an objection? Is it accurate? Is it inaccurate?
I would say that some of the exhibits are inaccurate in that they present code violations. I can elaborate if you want, or
No,
I can wait. Okay.
I'm just wondering if anybody has any objection to the actual
Right,
content
I-
of the exhibit.
I think the question is not, do you have any objections to the whole thing? Do you have any objections to these papers that have been presented?
And I guess the only thing I wanted to put on is that the papers are presenting that, you know what I mean, to say I don't object would,
Well, they're
say-
presented in a light that's favorable to them, which we understand,
Right.
obviously. That's the
Right,
way
but
people
in
advance.
addition, they're in violation of code, and that's all I wanted to put on there, that he's basically saying that these conform to code, and that would be it.
Okay. Come on up.
Is that-
Well, she was before you, sorry.
If I may, I think after everything's presented, then the audience gets their opportunity to make their statement. So this is not really the time for you to say you object or you do not object.
I don't think so either. I
Mr.
don't believe so.
Maybe, Mr. McLennan, make it a little easier. Maybe I'll withdraw that request to move those into evidence now to save the aggravation. We'll ask Mr.
Put 'em
DePello to
at the
finish the
end of the
testimony,
case.
and then we might make it easier for
Like we
everybody to
generally
comment.
do.
Yes.
Yes, that's no problem.
That's generally our format.
But we don't want to deny you your voice, so do you want to say anything about the exhibits as we provide?
Yes, I would like to say something about that map.
Okay. And can you identify yourself? I'm sorry.
My name is Margaret Labosh, Labosh. I live on South Grange Avenue. Yes, I do. This section of, yep. This section of the map right here along Grange Avenue, along Ridge Pike to the west of Grange Avenue and along South Grange Avenue and back here, and there are a lot of streets right here. This is a development called Collegeville Park that went bankrupt in 1929. All these little teeny-weeny slices and pieces are all like little pieces of property that are 30 feet wide, 50 feet wide. And I don't know about every property owner, but many property owners who have a house somewhere within the confines of what was called Collegeville Park. Own multiple pieces of those, and those little lots were sold at sheriff sales. And in fact, I live on South Grange Avenue, and I own like 2 or 3 of these slices along here that were cobbled together to make properties. And even though these look very small, like they're not 1 acre, and of course, okay.
Thank you for the explanation, but the question is, do you have an objection to the document?
Well, it's just deceiving that it looks like there's a lot of people that are non-conforming, and may very well be, but the map is very deceiving because they're little teeny-weeny slices that are only 30 to 50 feet wide, and I don't know anybody back there on Baker and Caswell, Crescent, Pershing, Frost, or Lansing, many of which are not even open, that own a property that's 30 feet wide. So the diagram is a little bit deceiving, and I just wanted to point that out.
Now, sir, you had,
I was required when I built my house to add more property to mine to make it bigger in order to build a house. And
right.
in reference to the first case that spoke earlier in the evening, my original house was 30 feet by 32 feet at 960 square feet, could fit on that person's lot. And I have a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house.
Sir, I don't want to cut you off over there, but if you... Okay, great, thank you, thank you. Now, are you, yeah, you can ask redirect questions.
This map was prepared by the township. I'm simply using it as a
Right.
piece of...
That's fine.
Right,
It's
right.
fine, but it'll,
We got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's your fault, Steve.
This board is all too familiar with paper streets and with tiny movie lots and the consolidation of them, so.
so with
yes,
that, we'll
we are aware of
reserve
that.
the admission of the documents until the end of your case. You have the ability to ask him any redirect questions as a result. I don't know that you necessarily have to.
Nothing further.
But, now, so you're finished with this witness.
I'm finished with this witness.
So the question is, and this is where it becomes a little uncontrollable, folks. Anyone has the right to ask him questions on cross-examination. The board has the right to ask questions for clarification. So what I would ask the audience to do is to, in essence, reserve questions for the time being, because some of those questions may be answered by the board when they ask questions. Is that fair enough? Otherwise, we're going to be here until they change the zoning in some of the...
But we're gonna let Kevin present before we get questions, right? We're gonna let Kevin present before we ask questions. Yeah, okay.